5 Deep Lessons from the book, How to Win Every Argument. Number 1. Sound reasoning is the basis of winning at argument. Logical fallacies undermine arguments. They are a source of enduring fascination and have been studied for at least 2.5 millennia. Knowledge of them is useful, both to avoid those used inadvertently by others and even to use a few with intent to deceive. The fascination and the usefulness which they impart, however, should not be allowed to conceal the pleasure which identifying them can give. Number 2. False conversion takes place when we deduce from the fact that all cats are animals the additional information that all animals are cats. The converse of a statement made by exchanging the subject and predicate is true in some cases, false in others. When it is performed for one of the invalid cases, it is called false conversion. All rats are 4-legged animals, so obviously all 4-legged animals are rats. This one is obviously false, others are less so. Some mortal beings are not cats, therefore some cats are not mortal beings. It would be remarkable if the existence of beings other than cats were sufficient to establish the existence of an immortal strain of cats. The rule is intricate but worth learning. We can make statements about all or some, and we can make positive or negative assertions. This gives us 4 types. 1. All are. 2. Some are. 3. None are. 4. Some are not. The rule is that only types 2 and 3 give valid conversions. If you exchange subject and predicate for types 1 and 4, you commit the fallacy of false conversion. The reason for the fallacy is that you cannot swap a distributed term covering the whole of its class for an undistributed one. In type 2, both subject and predicate cover only part of the class, and in type 3 they both cover all of it. Types 1 and 4 cannot be swapped around because they mix distributed with undistributed terms. What the rule means in practice is that you can swap around statements of the form some as are B's and no as are B's, but you cannot swap those which tell us all as are B's or some as are not B's. If we know that no innovative people are bureaucrats, we can deduce perfectly correctly that no bureaucrats are innovative people. What we cannot do is deduce from the knowledge that some journalists are not drunks the alternative statement that some drunks are not journalists. It may happen to be true, but we cannot deduce it from a false conversion. In practice, most people can spot the obvious falsity of converting statements about all animals or all cats. The fallacy tends to be more common and more deceptive when it appears in the some are not form. Since we know that some Marxists are not school teachers, it follows some school teachers are not Marxists. No, it doesn't. Your own willful use of this fallacy requires careful planning. It is a short-range tactical fallacy and is best concealed by not letting the audience know if you are talking about some or all. The claim that Texas rabbits are animals which grow to more than a meter long is skillfully ambiguous. It is not clear whether it refers to some Texas rabbits or all of them. Your surreptitious false conversion would then leave your audience convinced that any animal in Texas more than a meter in length must be a rabbit. It would also leave any Texans hopping mad. Number 3. False precision is incurred when exact numbers are used for inexact notions. When straightforward statements about experience are decked out in numbers well beyond the accuracy of possible measurement, the precision is false and can mislead an audience into supposing that the information is more detailed than is really the case. People say the Scots are mean, but they have been shown in surveys be 63% more generous than the Welsh. What measurement of generosity allows for that kind of a figure to be put on it? Both mathematics and science make widespread use of numbers, and both have prestige as sources of authority. The extension of exact numbers into areas quite inappropriate to them is often little more than the attempt to invest certain statements with the aura and prestige attaching to mathematics and science. The fallacy derives from the use of unjustified material and from the attempt to impart more confidence in the assertions than the evidence for them actually merits. Our mouthwash is twice as good, yes, 2 times as good, as its lead competitor. On what instrument, do you suppose, can one read off the quality of a mouthwash? And in what units? There are several versions of this fallacy, all of which have it in common that the numbers used give a misleading impression of the confidence one can place in the claim. 4 out of 5 people can't tell margarine from butter. It may be true, but how is it established? If large numbers on a 1-against-1 test repeatedly fail to distinguish them, we might be impressed. If smaller numbers fail to pick out the one margarine sample from a plateful of crackers covered with different types of butter, we might be rather less impressed. Yet another version might talk about quantity, where quality was a highly important factor. Kills 99% of all household germs. A worthy claim, unless the rest happen to be typhoid. Number 4. False precision is as necessary to the continued happiness of many academics as are public money and whiskey. Birmingham children are more racist than their London counterparts. Study of essays written by 10-year-olds showed that the London Grow used 15% less racial epithets than their peer group in Birmingham. The assumptions here are manifold. Maybe one can identify and agree upon what constitutes a racial epithet. Maybe their appearance in essays reflects their importance in the lives of children. Maybe the use of them by children is evidence of racism. Maybe the cultural differences between Birmingham and London are not important, etc., etc. None of these doubts qualify the opening line. Macroeconomists happily report that growth rates were only 1.4% instead of the predicted 1.7%, without telling us that some measurements of GDP cannot be taken within 5% accuracy. Some figures for growth of GDP could be out by up to 10%. Psychologists measure the ability of children to solve set problems and call their answers intelligence. Social scientists measure how people respond to questions and describe the answers as a measurement of attitudes. False precision is like a hastily erected and flimsy bridge to carry our knowledge over from reality into the world of our desire. The load is more than it will bear. Always use the fallacy when you need more authority for your claims. Behind the figures you quote, your audience will conjure up an army of white-coated scientists with horn-rimmed spectacles and dedicated doctors with stethoscopes draped in careless urgency. The invisible army will nod sagely in support of each precise statement you make. And if the audience might have doubted you, they will be reassured by the phantom legions who underwrite your figures. Whatever the academic merits, single-stream schooling certainly chase more balanced children. Surveys have revealed 43% psychological abnormalities among groups which just don't tell them that the abnormalities included self-esteem, competitiveness, and the desire to learn. Remember to be exact, especially when you are being vague. We can be 90% certain that blogs is the guilty man, and 100% certain that you cannot prove it. Number 5. Hedging is put around arguments, as it is around fields of crops, to prevent them from being trampled. Hedging an argument means sheltering behind ambiguous meanings so that the sense can be changed later. I said the last thing we wanted in the Middle East was an all-out war, and I stand by that. What we have embarked upon is a limited war. Hedging involves the advanced preparation for a definitional retreat. The words and phrases are so carefully chosen that the option is retained to do a switch in definitions. Opposing arguments and examples bearing down on the arguer suddenly find a hedge barring their advance, while their quarry may be cited in a different field. All I said was that I'd be home at a reasonable hour. I think that 3 o'clock in the morning is a reasonable hour in view of what I've been doing. Hedging is fallacious because it puts forward 2 or more different statements under the guise of one. The alternative interpretations are smuggled, like the companions of Odysseus, clinging to the undersides of the sheep which they appear to be. The hope is that the hearer, like the blinded Cyclops, will not know the difference. The effect of hedging is to render useless the information it purports to convey. Soothsayers would be sorrier souls without hedging to give them more than one chance. Just as you hedge bets in a race by backing more than one horse, so in prophecy, you can bet on more than one outcome. Most oracles and insurance agents are notorious for their use of hedging. Some take it to unimagined lengths. Dishonesty is an essential aspect of hedging. The ambiguity is inserted deliberately with intent to deceive and for the purpose of proving the perpetrator correct, whatever the outcome. The fairground fortune teller shelters harmlessly behind her hedge by telling you that you are destined to travel, even if only on the number 36 bus home. The economist hides rather more willfully behind the hedge that things will get worse. barring a major change in the world economy. When they get better, it is because there was a major change in the world economy. Hedging requires planning. Few people can toss off ambiguous phrases on the spur of the moment. We expect to find them in the prepared statement, which is issued, rather than in the off-the-cuff remark. You should accumulate a stock of phrases which look plain enough from one angle, but are bedecked with hedges as you approach them. You will find the check paid directly into your bank account. When? Number 6. Simple repetition of a point of view does nothing by way of supplying additional evidence or support, yet it can erode the critical faculty. There is a completely mistaken supposition that a thing is more likely to be true if it is often heard. Please, sir, it wasn't me, but this is your catapult, Smith Minor. Please, sir, it wasn't me, and witnesses saw you pick up the stone. Please, sir, it wasn't me. This could go on indefinitely, unless the heavy hand of an ad baculum cuts it short. We can all spot that Smith Minor would have done his case more good if he had been able to find anything else to say. Would we spot it if he simply kept saying, socialism means rule by the workers, however? Utterly discredited political credos, which adherents cling to for other than intellectual reasons, are supported by the ad nauseam fallacy. If an economic system brings general prosperity and gives ordinary people access to the things which were once the prerogative of the rich, it is quite difficult to make out a case that this is exploitation. Fortunately, one does not have to. The ad nauseam effect means that the charge can simply be repeated over and over again without argument or evidence. Eventually, some people will fall for it. Advertisers have long been life members of the ad nauseam society. They know that a specious claim acquires credibility and force if it is repeated often enough. They know the importance of building up not a rational conviction, but a habit of association. It washes whiter than bleach. That's whiter than bleach. Yes, whiter bleach. What they tell us 3 times is true. Many of the proverbs we hear in childhood are dinned into us so many times that we often come to suppose that there must be truth in them. This assumption seems able to survive all of the contrary evidence which life thrusts before us, and in some cases survives a simultaneous belief in contradictory proverbs. It is quite hard to look before you leap without being lost through hesitation. And while many hands make light work, they do tend to spoil the broth, all of which shows the power of the simple ad nauseum. To use the argumentum ad nauseum is easy enough. All you have to do is to repeat yourself. It is harder to recognize the situations where it might succeed. The general rule is that constant repetition over a long period of time is more effective than short bursts. You must be totally impervious to arguments against you, always reiterating the same point. This not only bores your audience to tears, it also instills in them the futility of opposing you. And when they give up in total weariness, observers will begin to suppose that they can no longer counter your claims.